we're going to go against Goldman Sachs, we're going to beat them, even though no one had ever heard of Dylan Reed.
Mr. Franklin Fritz Hobbs.
If you can be Bill Gates or Elon Musk, or if you're a genius or Jobs, the rest of us who might be perfectly smart and work perfectly, you need help. You learn that in crew because one person's off out of 8, you're toast. Some guy had found my resume and they said, why don't you think about coming down to Wall Street? They had to send me books over the summer so that I could read up on what the heck it was, because I didn't know, because I hadn't taken any courses in finance.
The silver medal reminds you how much you hate to fucking lose. And for me...
I didn't use the F word.
Yes, you did.
No.
Welcome to Game Recognizes Game, brought to you by AposHealth. So people ask me all the time, NJ, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this show? And I tell them, it's really simple. It's all about the stories. For over 3 decades in doing what I do, man, it's the stories that keep inspiring me. Even as most recently as a few months ago, when I got the chance to meet our next guest, Mr. Franklin Fritz Hobbs, who, when I met him within 5 minutes, I noticed this little nugget hanging out with other crap on this nail in his office. And I said to him, is this what I think it is? He goes, what do you think it is? I said, that's a 72 silver medal. And he said, well, how do you know? I said, well, I was at the 96 games on the medical staff, and the 72 was the last to have this little chain. Now they're all ribbons. He goes, I said, but it's supposed to be behind glass. It's supposed to be in a frame. It's supposed to be put away for posterity so everyone can see it. Not him. No, he kept it on the nail. I'm like, why do you just leave it hanging there with all the other junk? He says, well, that reminds me every single day how much I hate to fucking lose. This represented a lifetime of motivation to just get it right. And that's exactly what he did. 2-time Olympian, 68 Mexico City Olympics, 72 Munich Olympics, commentator on ABC on the 76 Olympics, and went on to have a storied career on Wall Street, and currently chairman of the board of directors of Ally Financial. Fritz, man, it's an honor to have you here, man. Thanks for being here.
Wow, I should have hired you years ago. So be my PR agent. The one thing you said that is interesting, when shows you how life evolves. In 1968, I was on a college crew, the Harvard crew, which we won the Olympic trials by about that much.
But you won the Olympic trials. Can we say that again? Won the Olympic trials.
In the United States. That's a lot different than the big game. So then we went to Mexico, and unfortunately for us, a couple of our folks did not adapt to altitude, and we got our butts kicked. And my coach, who was a legendary coach.
So right, in Mexico City, altitude was an issue.
Altitude was a huge issue.
Right, and Bob Beamon won the world record that stood for years in the world, in the long jump.
All of the races under 800 meters, they set world records because the altitude really did make it. Yeah. When you're rowing, it's truly, you're going, there's nothing left when you're done. So what happens is you go into oxygen debt. Anything over 2 minutes, you go into oxygen debt. Yeah. So I have a mediocre knee here, and I crawled out of that thing at the end after we'd gotten killed. And I said to myself, it can't end this way. So that's how I stayed engaged in the sport somewhat for a year or so. And then I really got back into it 2 years before Munich. Yeah. And fortunately, my brother was in Boston at the same time. And so we trained together at 6 in the morning. Then he went back to teach school, and I went to graduate school. So it was a wonderful...
By the way,
yes,
you didn't get your ass kicked in 68, okay? Came in 6th.
I was ass
kicked.
Okay?
See that? 6th is ass kicking. This is the stories.
Anyways, no, but that's what kept me going, is that we had the best crew in the world, we thought, because we'd beaten everybody the year before, blah, blah, blah. And to come in just to be completely whipped in Mexico City was a wake-up call for all of us. So 3 or 4 of us kept at it, and we all ended up, my brother and another set of brothers, we all ended up on the 72 crew, which was way small for international competition, but boy, were these guys tough. Started with 400 people, got down to 8, is the way to think about it, as they over the year. And the last race of my life, we backed into the starting gate at Munich, lane 6. Interesting, because when you all have seen Boys on the Boat, the American crew was in lane 6. That was the last time I was in Germany. And the East Germans were in 1, but the big boys were in 4, New Zealand. We backed in, and I suddenly said to myself, this is your last race ever that's going to matter. And
with your brother.
With my brother, but the only person I was, and this is a first person singular, how I grew up, which was about me, to maybe to too much of an extent. The only person I was scared about in that boat was me, because I knew how tough these guys were. And that's a great way, and it's a good segue into a lot of bigger questions you and I have talked about, which is, you know, if you can be Bill Gates or Elon Musk, or if you're a genius, or Jobs, the rest of us who might be perfectly smart and work perfectly, you need help. You learn that in crew, because one person's off out of 8, you're toast. And
the whole boat's off.
The whole boat's off, you know. And that's what had happened to us in Mexico, because we didn't have the same stroke. He came out of the boat, blah, blah, blah. So it was really a wonderful experience that summer when we suddenly realized we were pretty fast. We went to a pre-Olympic regatta. And so we were fortunate enough to, on the last stroke, beat the East Germans, which was very satisfying, because that was when the East Germans truly were a pod by themselves. You know, they didn't...
Communist country.
No. The Russians, they were like us. You know, we learned over those years of rowing, you really learn, and at the Olympics, first of all, we're all alike in many respects, but the East Germans at that time, they were always kept sheltered away from everybody. The New Zealanders, who ended up winning the gold medal from us, 25 years later, we went down to New Zealand and rowed with them. And I thought, gosh, I'm a pocket handkerchief compared to some of these guys in the middle. They're so big. But it was a great way to cap off a career, and we ended up with a great result. A little side story, because this is why you need a wife. We came to New York, and I got a phone call. They said, come on, Fritz, this in 75. They said, come on, we need you to come out for the 76 boat. And I thought, it's so hard to row in New York. Where do you go? You go up to Columbia or something. But I was thinking about it. You had
started your career in New York already?
Yeah, I was long. I started in 72. So I'm sort of having this talk with my wife. Well, you know, maybe this could be something we could do. They could use me and all, you know, usual BS. She looks at me and she says, so let me ask you this. When are you going to get on with your life? Boom. Hammer right here, you know, sledgehammer in my forehead. And she was totally right, because it was, listen, games are wonderful, but you got to move on with other things too. So that was sort of how...
Many Olympians forget that, because I've worked with many Olympians, and this is all they know. They forget about school, relationships, you know, friendships, right?
It's easy to have happen. And I love competition and all that, but at a certain point, you do move on, and the competition manifests itself in a different way, whether it be whatever job you're in, or the people you're working with, and the climbing certain mountains wherever they are, because every business has different mountains to climb. And I got very lucky, as I was saying to one of your associates earlier. I had no idea what I was coming down. Some guy had found my resume, and they said, why don't you think about coming down to Wall Street? And they had to send me books over the summer so that I could read up on what the heck it was, because I didn't know, because I hadn't taken any courses in finance, that type of finance. Long story short, extraordinarily lucky for me, because it was an amazing firm, amazing experiences for 20, 25 years. And out of that, you know, so many things have happened to me. I use the word serendipity. You create your own serendipity in many respects. How does stuff happen? It happens because, well, someone thinks of you, or someone likes you, or respected what you were doing.
Puts it out in the universe.
Boom.
Right?
And that has been a trademark of mine, in that people say to me, well, what are you going to do in 5 years? I've never been able to answer that. I have no clue what I'm doing in 5 years. I know what I'm doing now. I told you this. As long as my fingers are tingling, you know, I get a little tingle in the morning, I'm okay. You know, now it can be...
That's your juice.
That's where you feel like, and that can manifest itself in all kinds of ways. But
sure.
in my case, it was always like, because it's very competitive, both in terms of your anxiousness to move up the corporate chain, but more importantly, investment banking in those days was really competitive in the context of the other firms and all that. So it turned out to be somewhat up my alley. Then as I went through that and ended up managing that firm, we put it into a European firm, which gave me a whole new set of experiences in Europe, et cetera. So I've been very fortunate in that regard because it sort of played itself out where I got a broad range of experience. And then out of that, I was just saying, I was a fellow who was on the board with me at Ally. He'd put $1 billion into a bank in Vienna. And he called me one day and he said, Fritz, I'd like you to go over there and be on the board. I said, Steve, I'm not going over there to be on the board because I know how the Germans and that whole Germanic world thinks. It's totally hierarchical. Yeah. And if I'm just another schmuck, I can't help you. So he made me the chairman of what they call the
chairman of the schmuck?
Supervisory committee of the bank in Austria. And it was pretty easy. I mean, I think anyone in this room we could sit down and say in 20 minutes you'd know what the problem was. Too many people. Now in Europe you have that all over the place. You have too many people.
Too many layers.
And they hate firing people. And I used to have, and I had the woman, a really neat woman, who was the head of the Workers' Council. Workers' Council job is they get a third of the board seats in Vienna. In Germany, they get half. So their job is to vote down anything related to comp, anything related to backing up the management team. They just sit there. And I used to laugh at Ingrid. I said, Ingrid, this is going to be a great bank. You're going to be proud. You and your people are going to be proud. Now, meanwhile, we're sneaking out about 1,200 people before they really figured out what was going on. But guess what?
You had to get lean and mean.
Guess what? That bank right now, being led by a fellow I found down in the finance department, a young man who was a killer. He's now running it. The bank is unbelievably successful, and I've never had a chance. I keep saying, now, is Ingrid still there? I want to know, is she proud of this company?
It's not just a shoe. It's an innovative, personalized treatment for your body, designed to relieve knee or lower back pain and get you moving better. Apos, precisely what you need.
Let's go back a little bit. So serendipity is a real threat because now as you look back in your life, you might even realize how much serendipity had such a play and such a big impact in your life. You weren't supposed to be a rower. You wanted to be a football player, man.
That's right.
You wanted to be, and you would have made a great tight end, great halfback, right? But what happened?
My senior year of high school, my father, I had 3 brothers and sisters. She took the 4 of us out to Aspen. We'd never had a family trip. My father was cheap. And except on one thing, education. Yeah. He never was cheap on that.
Because education is power.
Exactly. Yeah. He said, all the education you want, I'll take care of. So my brother and I, he was 2 years younger than me, we were in a class of powder skiers. In the East Coast, you just ski on ice all the time. So we were out powder skiing, and in powder skiing, you bounce up and down. And he and I were standing on the hill, and one of the guys in the class came down and bounced, came right down on this knee and severed this tendon, and then went down my leg with all.
So the actual ski itself.
Severed the tendon. About 25 years later, my brother said to me something. He said, Fritz, I've never told you this, and it was very cold, and he said, I've never told you this, but when I could see the white of the bone, he said, I almost threw up. He didn't tell me this for 25. It was a big yawning mouth, I guess, or something. Anyways, that's why so after that was done, I couldn't. They said no contact sports for a year.
It's like a machete.
And so the fluke.
No contact sports for a year.
For a year. So when I went to register at college, some person came up to me and said, "Well, you're tall. Why don't you row?"
Non-contact.
That was all fine because it had none of this, smashing it. So I went down to the boathouse and started to row in this big old machine where they just sort of, it was like rowing a cement block.
The erg, right?
Well, that was later.
Yeah.
This was out on the water. They had this huge thing with about 20 people in it, a barge. Anyways, after about a month, I said, this is not for me. I'm going to get all tied up here and all. So I went up to the squash courts. I'd played tennis when I was in high school. Played a lot of tennis. So I went up to the squash courts and unbelievably had the most famous squash coach, of that generation, a guy named Jack Barnaby. So I started to play squash where at least in the beginning, I could run, I could hit the ball, but I didn't know anything else. So this is a story I haven't told you. So I go back for my sophomore year, and Barnaby has the national champions, and I'm about 35th on the ladder down here with some guy who played low on the freshmen. And his one comment to me the whole sophomore year, he said, "Fritz, you're a good athlete. You might make if you stay at it, you might make the team your senior year." Well, I was so pissed. I don't know where that came from because I didn't know what I was doing anyways. So long story short, that whole year, I gradually, and when there were 5 matches left, I snuck onto the team because a good friend of mine hurt his back, and so I made it to the team.
Serendipity.
4 matches to get your letter. So I said to Barnaby when I graduated, I said, "You know, Jack, I'm the only, you know, he was an extraordinary coach, but a pain in the ass. But that was that kind of wonderful experience where you just sort of stay at it and you think if I can just beat one more guy, maybe I'll get on. And so I had a lucky break because my subsequent very close friend hurt himself. So I ended up having
Serendipity again.
Total serendipity on that. And so there you go. I had my junior year, we were on 2 national championship teams. And somebody wrote me who sent a letter to SI on this, and he said, "Well, only you and Earl McCullough." Remember, Earl McCullough played at USC, and they won the national championship in football and track. I'd say that was a little heavier work than what I was doing, but anyways, it was pretty, yeah. So that was, who would have ever thought? If you had told me that that's what I was going to do, this wasn't a chance. So I think, you know, you and I have talked about this, Marty. I mean,
The concept of teamwork really also.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You really do learn much more in rowing than in a personal sport like tennis or squash.
Football, definitely.
And football, too.
Yeah. That's
So,
interesting because I always describe football that if a player and a position, they all have a job, an assignment for the game. And if each person does their assignment to the best of their ability, that team has a chance to win. And we've talked about how that concept of just do your job, do your assignment, can create great corporations. And you talk about rowing in such a revered way because you love the team working as one. You just...
Yeah, it's a really hard-ass sport.
Yes.
People say to me, "What?" I said,
beyond hard.
And I think anybody who's an old man who's rowing in masters rowing, they're nuts. Yeah. I tell them this, even though
your wife knew you were nuts.
She knew,
right? She knew
yeah,
you were
but not
nuts.
nuts to do it to continue. You know.
Yeah.
It's like I used to play in squash tournaments. I found out old men on the squash court are jerks, and it doesn't take much for me to become a jerk when I'm competing with someone. You know. So I learned that about myself. I said, don't play in squash tournaments with old men because they are. If they take it so seriously, and I take it plenty seriously. I mean, I'm trying to be cavalier here, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, when you get out there, you want to win.
Yeah.
I went out to the nationals many years in squash in a hot court, which means you just run. And I run into a guy who I didn't know, but was at Harvard with me, and he was a really good lacrosse player. So he was a very good athlete. And in this court, the quality of shots didn't matter because it was like playing with a Super Bowl. I had a near-death experience. I was not going to lose to him, and goddamn, it was like this. And I finally got him. I thought to myself, now that's the end of that game because that's too close to near death. But you know, you have that in you sometimes, and you just got to make sure that you control it in some respect. You know.
Are you born with it? Do you think a person can be born with the desire to just win?
I think that's a really good question. Because my father was not a good athlete. He had 3 sons who were all good athletes. My mother was, the steel fist, and she didn't show it that way, but she was.
Yeah.
So I don't know where that totally came from. My father was mostly interested in what we were doing in school. You know,
the grades.
The grades.
Yeah.
So he was very on the grades, but I don't know where that came from. My brother, who was a better athlete than I, the one who was 2 years younger, he didn't manifest it quite the same way with him. When he and I rode together, we actually rode quite differently. I would call him slow twitch and I'm fast twitch. What does that mean? Well, when I go off on a boat, I want to be ahead. Fast twitch, I want to be ahead. I don't want to. My brother would take the view, I don't care what they do. At the end of 1,500 meters, the race is 2,000. At the end of 1,500 meters, I'm going to get them. Yeah. So when we were in a pair together,
You were the sprinter, he was the marathoner.
We were okay, but not great, because we just were different. Now in the 8, it didn't matter because he was up in the boat in the power and I was down at the stern where, the quickness helped. But it was a great, it came more easier to him than it did to me. And so ergo, and I'm 2 years older and all that, so, but
almost like he was more mature.
Oh, absolutely.
But yet he was younger.
Absolutely. Was he more and smarter, scary smart. So, but it was a great. I can't tell you how fun it is to go compete at an international level with someone in your family, And we were quite different, Billy and I, but it was a really unique experience to spend that 71, 72, those 2 years with my brother. Yeah. And then another set of brothers that we were really close to, they also made it. So we called ourselves the brothers, and we said the others were the other 4 people in the boat, just to let them know that we were in charge.
When we first met, you said that line that will forever, I'll remember and I'll recall when you said, the silver medal reminds you how much you hate to fucking lose. And for me...
I didn't use the F word.
Yes, you did.
No.
But I wanted to hand you a bullhorn, and I wanted you to talk to the youth of America playing youth sports. You have to learn to win. You also have to learn to lose. And the greatest winners have lost the most.
Yeah, I think I think the second part is more important.
Yeah.
It's hard to deal with losing.
But let's talk
But you've got to learn.
Are we forgetting to teach our kids how to win and how to lose? Because
you mean a blue ribbon for everybody?
Right.
Yeah.
Or a ribbon, a trophy.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't tend to be any expert on that, but it always
trophy
surprises
generation.
me. Yeah, that does surprise me. Because at the end of the day, someone's going to get promoted before the other person, or it just happens, and you got to decide when that happens to you. Well, is my response to say I got screwed, or is my response to say I still think I'm better than that, I'll catch him, or whatever. I think that is
because winning is actually defined by the context you're in.
Well, you and I were talking about this at one point. Every firm that I've been with, and a couple of schools, when I was the head of the board at a school or something, I feel like if you can't say what you're doing on the back of your business card, if it takes a paragraph or 2 paragraphs, something's wrong. So you got to be able to, one, but in that little sentence is, we're here to win. And winning can be defined in any millions of ways, but as long as people in an organization believe, or tend to believe, or can believe because there's some palpable examples of why they're making some progress, that's the deal. I say this to everybody. I said, this is what the world's about now. What ends up happening, that can lead to some really badass behavior within the pod that's trying to, because people are so competitive, they don't care about the pod, they care about themselves and where they stand. So that's always a balancing act, but I do think that...
As Vic Pitino says, they're playing for the back of the jersey as opposed to playing for the front.
Boom. Yeah. I think that's well said, actually. Because, in Dillon Reed, which is the firm I started in, they had an extraordinary culture. I had nothing to do with it, but I ended up inheriting it, and I had a couple of kids who were...
A healthy competition?
Oh yeah. But really extraordinary, not like Wall Street. This was an extraordinary group of men and women that were in a completely different sort of like, we're here to win. We're going to go against Goldman Sachs. We're going to beat them, even though no one had ever heard of Dillon Reed. And I had one young man who worked for me. God damn, he was good. And one day, one of the female partners, she walked into my office, closed the door, and she said, if you don't fire him, I'm quitting. He's the most arrogant first person. Well, guess what? 30 years later, I had lunch with him a while ago. He now runs the most successful boutique in America. I hate to think it. And
this arrogant SOB.
This arrogant SOB who worked for me, and
what did you see in him that maybe others, like the female partner, what did you see?
Well, you could just see how he handled clients. Clients wanted to be with him because he knew stuff. He was on it. He was all over it.
He was a winner.
Yeah, he was a winner. Yeah. But that kind of winning could go sideways pretty quick. I mean, this was an important partner of mine who walked it. And I said, well, now,
Barbara, she probably had some valid points.
Oh, she had totally valid points.
Yeah.
But I said, Barbara, let's just take a deep breath here, and we'll do. So we sort of fumbled our way through it. She didn't quit, which was turned out to be great. But he subsequently has now, I had lunch with him, and he might as well have been spouting my bullshit from 15 years earlier, the old Dylan Reed bullshit. I couldn't believe it about how he thinks about his own firm, because that wasn't him. Well, he learned a lot. Yeah. So did I. When you get with good people, that's the other thing that I think young people really ought to be focused on is work with people that you think you can learn from that actually are better than you. Now they may not stay that way forever, but are better than you that you can learn from, because that's the whole game. And that's why I don't buy this. We're gonna run our businesses by Zoom. You can't do Zoom what you and I are doing here. You just can't. And I think most of life is about people, interface with people. Not everybody. If you can write fantastic code, relationships matter. And that's where the serendipity comes in too. Because if you have relationships or you've established trust or confidence in other people because of how you behaved in a business circumstance, then guess what? They don't forget that. I had my boss, he went on to become the secretary of the Treasury, a guy named Nick Brady. And we were talking about some guy who had really screwed up me in a deal, and Nick was aware of it. And he said, Fritz, look, Wall Street's relatively small. There will be a moment in time, and he goes like this, he's gonna come into your gun sight. And it didn't, not everybody. It did happen though. The guy wanted the reference, or he
kissed up a little bit.
There was a moment where then, I would say to the person, well, I'd do a little homework on that. I never would say this guy's a complete jerk, but I would say, just do a little homework. So that, you lay, he gave me another great, your career is a field of snow. When you walk across that field of snow, you leave footprints. And by the time you're an older gentleman, this is when Brady was in his 50s, and I felt like he was an old fart. He said, by the time
I'm in my 50s, by the way.
I know you are. You'd be this. But, well, at that time, that's what I thought. But he said, by the time, when I'm looking back, I know the people who have footprints like this, the weavers, the ones who aren't dealing straight when you're talking with them, you know that. And you know what?
I love that analogy.
That's totally right.
You see the straight footprints or the circular ones,
You do,
right?
and your career is those footprints that you leave in the snow. And I've always thought about that's just a great way of putting it. I think, and you would hope, I would hope I'd have enough to say, well, I don't think I weave too much, but I'm sure I did. But that's a good way to think about your career path too, because everything you do leaves a mark. Now, some guys get away with it, but ultimately, my experience has been they get, some end up on the roof, they make it, but most fall by the way somewhere because people know that they're, SOB or what, someone you don't want to work with.
You mentioned something that's really powerful about telling a young person to work on a team, let's say in an organization, that makes you better, right? That the people around you make you better for whatever reason, smarter, more agile, they do their job better than you can at that point in your
Marty,
career.
let me just add to that though. What I would say is a lot of it is selling,
Business in general.
Selling.
Yeah.
And how you sell is how you interface with people.
Yeah.
To me and you learn when you watch people who are really good at selling or really good at solving problems, you really learn. I had a guy who worked for me. He was the best investment banker that I, ever. Never made a mistake. So when we did promotions at the end of the year, and he was at a certain level, all the people that not at his level who didn't get promoted, they come and say, well, I'm as good as him. I said, I'm as good as anybody in there. And I said, are you as good as Davis? His name was Davis Terry. I said, well, if you are, okay, but I don't think you are. And they know they're not, because he's that good. So it's all about, I think, the osmosis you get from really good people.
Yeah.
You learn good things and some bad things. And you learn what works and what doesn't work, and it's obviously different from case to case.
And as you know, I coach youth sports, and I help counsel parents on the type of teams they should be on. And I always say, if you're a kid, and in this case, an individual in a company, if you're the best person on the team, you need to find another team because they're not making you better.
That's right.
Right?
That's really true in business too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing. I think it's, from what I can tell, the younger generation now, if it's not going great, I'm out of here. it's a lot. It's not going to go great all the time. It's just not going to.
As a matter of fact, it's not going to go great many more times.
You got it. I wanted to run Dylan Reed so badly that I think for a year and a half, how my wife put up with me going home whining. God damn it. You know, I didn't show it at the office because I had so many good friends there and working with them.
You became that same employee.
Whoa, exactly. So the wife looks at me and says, Fritz, shut up. And she was totally right. You know, you and by the way, that's another good point. Just because you work hard, doesn't always mean that you're going to get there.
That's right.
It's, you know, you got to come to grips with that. And that's another thing. Self-awareness is, I mean, remember when I told you about going down to that starting line? I promise you, I never was in a boat where I didn't think I was the best guy. Except,
I love that.
On the only one that really mattered, I was only scared about one guy, me, because I would have let those guys down.
Yeah.
And I've been through this before, obviously, for, you know, rowing internationally.
I think a common thread there is also effort, because I have two boys who, big athletes, and I talk very little about the score. I said, it has to be how you feel when you walk off that corridor off the field. Was the effort there? Because that's all the coach is ever going to remember. It's all you're going to remember is the effort. And that's the same true for that individual who is working hard, may not get that golden apple, but the effort was always there. And that's something that that's always success when you have the effort. And people forget about the score, how many points you score, the final score of the game. People forget that. People never forget the effort, particularly your teammates.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, look, we all have regrets, right? We all have regrets. I didn't do this or I didn't do that. But I've always said that in my career path, it was conscious. I can't say I was doing this for the money, or I was doing it because money was a secondary issue for me. It was about getting up the ladder or whatever. And
it was the game.
It was the game.
It was the game.
It was the game. That's a good way of putting it. And for me, the money was a nice sidelight.
Yeah.
And then when I got further along, it was a little, then it just happens, I guess. But it's not given that you're going to get to where you want to get.
Yeah.
And that happens. And I remember the height of my tennis career. I was beating the #1 guy in New England. I had his ass. I choked. I remember to this day. To this day, I can remember
what you did wrong.
I choked right there in Oyster Harbor's up in the Cape somewhere. I choked. I had this son of a bitch. So you remember things like that. You got to remember the bad stuff because it's not all straightforward that you're getting the laurels and the.
Well, you've said once before, the harder you work, the luckier you got.
I think that's true for sure.
That's creating a little bit of serendipity.
That's
right?
true for sure. But you got to be alert to the fact it doesn't always work, right? And that doesn't mean you give up. That doesn't mean that you piss on whoever didn't promote you.
Yeah.
You have to deal with it in the context of, okay, is this a temporary setback where I am, or can I get ahead, or do I need a new place to ply my trade? I have a sense that and I watch my own children. Boy, there's a tendency if it doesn't go perfectly in the first whatever period of time, I'm moving on.
Right, they move on.
But I don't quite get that.
And the body language shows it too.
Well, business is hard. I'm not business. Everything's hard. Life is hard. Sports is hard.
Right.
So and it comes in stages, and you find, I think you learn about yourself. Okay, how am I going to react to disappointment? How am I going to react to losing? Because you do lose. I hate to say that, but you do lose.
You don't. Do you lose?
Of course I lose. You know that better than anybody. But I think that the hardest thing is to have enough self-awareness that you can take criticism constructively. The guy who was one of my mentors, was a fantastic, he looked at me one day when I was been in the business 5 or 6 years, and he said, it's going to take you 4 years to get really good. And this is a guy I really respected. To this day, I respect him. He was quasi-mentor. I said, I left that room and I said to myself, son of a bitch. If it took you 4 years, I'm doing it in 2. Well, guess what? 4 years later, I walked into his office and I said to him, Garrett, you were right. because I realized I'd gotten better, in the technical part of the business, which wasn't that easy for me. The people stuff I liked, but
A wise man once said, you finally grow up when you're done knowing it all.
Yeah, exactly.
When you realize you don't know shit, then things can happen in your life.
Yeah, it's very hard when there's particularly in New York City. New York City screws up everybody's head because there's always your roommate or your classmate who's ahead of you, making more money. They have a house in the Hamptons, they have this, they have that. There's always somebody ahead of you. In that great New Yorker cartoon that shows this big fish with teeth, then the next fish, down to the little minnow. So there's always somebody faster. So the New York, I think, plays with people's heads and that's where bad stuff happens. You start making mistakes. You start not dealing straight. We saw it all the time on the Wall Street.
Yeah.
Because there's well, Joe did it, why can't I? Blah, blah. And I think that the where we live here is so competitive in all walks of life that it leads to some pretty aberrant behavior if you're not careful, because how do we start? Well, I want to win. Well, I'm not winning. This can't be me. Yeah. Well, that's the sort of analysis. You got self-awareness, which on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably about a 4. So the ability to sort of come to grips with what your fingers going, what you really like to do, and
passion, game,
which is everything.
Yeah.
And the real question is, if you've lost that, then
might be in the wrong game.
You might be in the wrong game, but it might be you too. Maybe you're just not cut. You're not cut of the stuff to be really feeling it.
Fritz, let's talk a little bit about how your role as a leader has had to evolve over the years. So we talked about this trophy generation, and in some ways, you've inherited this workforce that came from a world where monotony was praised and everyone got a ribbon, everyone got a trophy. Now they're in the workforce. You had to evolve. Tell me a little bit about how's that, because that's challenging for management.
I'm not sure I evolved that much. I'll tell you why. No, my thesis, my management thesis has been, let's go back to it. We as an organization are here to win. And we got to come up with what we mean by win, but because it doesn't always have to be number one. It has to be, how are we going to make progress every year? And what I found, my leadership style is, I'm not too sympathetic to all of that. I'm going to be in there on the weekends with you, by the way. I feel a lot of times, we used to have this debate with my partners. We used to have a Monday morning meeting. They said, well, let's make it Tuesday in the summers. And I said, I see. So you guys are all going to be out in your estates on Long Island while we have these kids working, not happening. So my view has always been, if I'm prepared to live that way, and hopefully without being, in fact, not being, because these kids were better, some of them were better than me anyways, that if I'm going to live that way, that we've got an agreed upon goal, you can live that way too. And if you can't, that's okay, but what you learn, like in sports, you learn who is there and who's not in every kind of team sport, and particularly in something like rowing, but you do it in any team sport. Sure. So,
and are they helping you win?
Well, that's the point. Right. And if they want to be on a team that really, like a lot of times you're doing presentations over the weekend because one of the partners or me are going to go out and talk to a CEO, and we've got to make a case. And here we are, this little firm that they knew sort of had a blue chip name, but it was relatively small.
And you're still going after the Goldman Sachs.
We're going after anybody, yeah. And we just had to be better. And that was the challenge. Can you come up with better, clever ideas that you can make so that when I'm talking to a CEO, he looks at me and says, well, these guys aren't completely full of bullshit like most of the people on Wall Street. They have something to say. That's easy. That's an easy little speech to give. It's real hard to deliver.
Yeah.
But I didn't leave it in some guy's hands over the weekend. I'm down there editing the goddamn thing because it's that important to me. So if they know it's that important to me and I'm doing it without being I'm treating you as a teammate as opposed to someone who works for me. That's the way I used to think about it now. I'm sure people who work for me might not have. Well, I think they probably would. Even now, 25 years later, people stop me on the street and say, I work for you at Dillon Read. So I take that as a great pride because I think we really had a band of brothers sort of approach to it.
Yeah.
that's Hobbs's. I'm sure some of my partners would not have agreed with that, but that's how I looked at it.
Sounds like, in some ways, the simplicity of your message, we are here to win. This company is here to win. And the simplicity of that message, you probably made up and helped so many people in your workforce just to get better, right? And learn their assignment, learn their role, right? And for many of them who winning wasn't, let's say, emphasized growing up, you almost made up for what a lot of parents fell short with their kids with.
Yeah, I think though the people in up Wall Street in those days had some of that winning thing. I mean, Jay Powell was he's the head of the federal. He worked for me his first 5 years of his career.
Wow.
And
I was every day.
I was bullshit when Brady took him down to Washington because Jay would have been a great player at the firm. So
he's the head of the
Federal Reserve. Yeah.
Federal Reserve,
so he worked
yeah.
for me the first 5 years of his career, and so I'm out in Chicago at a big bank, blah blah blah, and Jay's speaking. This is before he was made the head. They were talking about it, but he's there with the Chicago head. And there's a rows of all these, banking types. So I had my hand up, and I could see him lean over, and he leaned over to the guy from the head of the Chicago Fed, and he said, "Call him the guy with the white hair." Me. I saw him later. I said, "Jay, thanks a lot. I'm glad you appreciated it." But I would argue that Jay Powell is the real deal, because I knew he was the real deal 30 years ago. So I'm not surprised that, he's gotten to where he has, whatever people think about it. But I mean, he is the real deal. So, but he started off in a really good environment. And then my boss is the one who took him to Washington, Brady. So, I think if people, and you'll never get 100% sign up for that, what I'm talking about, right, Marty, but guess what? The less than 100%ers, they fall by the wayside somewhere. They get an offer from some other firm for a lot more money or whatever. Yeah. But in general, I think that's what makes it sort of fun. That we're sitting in this together, and we're going toe to toe with Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, even though they're looking.
They're the heavyweights, and you're the
little
lightweight
shit firms, But we ran faster.
Yeah. Now you've reached some of the highest levels in sports and business. I mean, for my viewers at home, training for the Olympics is the hardest single thing any human being could do in any sport. What it takes to make the Olympics is incomparable, undescribable. It is just every one of those, right? And you've reached the highest levels. Now, as chairman of Ally Financial, which I think I reminded you earlier today, that their commitment to sponsorship in sports has been tremendous, so much so they have leading the way that other companies are following. And it's so interesting how your success in sports, and now you're chairman of Ally Financial, who is now leading the way in sports sponsorship for equitable sponsorship, both male and female sports, and that's their commitment, 50-50 to 2027. That is just so remarkable that you are leading a company that is so now tied to sports.
I'd like to take credit for that, but I can't. There's a really fun lady at Ally who I have a lot of fun, who does all of this stuff, and she started with a lot of women's sports things.
What's her name?
She's been hugely successful. Andrea Bremer. It was part of that thing you showed me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I have more fun calling her on Sundays when our goddamn car hasn't won the NASCAR race or whatever it is. I said, Andrea, get rid of the white car. Let's go back to the purple car. At least people know it's Ally. So she and we go back and forth like that. And I pull her, but she's really a very powerfully down the track you just described, which I had nothing to do with it. That's really her. Advertising's very hard to value. Very hard to value. I've never heard anyone give me a cogent argument about, and I was on the board of Molson Coors for 18 years, so I saw a lot of goddamn ads, and I thought, yeah, I love that ad, it's fantastic. Well, it didn't sell any beer, so you learn that it's hard to really figure what you're getting for when you pay for a lot of advertising. So it's always a challenge of what the budget should be, particularly when you're a bank like we are, which is really,
online,
not the online bank leader. So it's it's
beyond no branches, right?
No branches. We're all online. It's beyond my pay grade. You'll have to talk to Andrea right here. She'd give you a pretty good step on that. But
but I think it's so great to see that you're leading an organization as a banker that has such a strong connection to sports today.
Oh yes, yeah.
You sponsor like Breonna Stewart and NASCAR and WNBA,
soccer.
women's soccer.
Yeah, a lot of women's. So it's been. But again, I'm not sure I could give you a real answer about how. I just don't know.
You can take a little credit.
I'm going to take some credit because only because I think I'm hugely fond of her. She's very good.
That's fantastic.
Very good. It takes one to know one, you know.
It's you recognizing her, right? That's what we do here. We recognize others. Now we're going to do one of my favorite segments called Moving the Chains, and it's sponsored by NOBULL, a footwear brand dedicated to helping their customers achieve both physical, mental, and emotional goals. And moving the chains is a moniker for life. You know, in football, it's 10 yards. Chains move, it's a first down. But it's a small win. And on any given Sunday, you get enough small wins and you're having a pretty good day, right? And as a moniker for life, what do you do every day that is a non-negotiable for you, that helps move your day forward? That little tingle you mentioned, how do you move that forward every day?
Well, that's a good question. Well, first thing, I read 3 newspapers, first thing, 6 o'clock in the morning. So I read the 3 New York papers.
Times, Journal?
Times, Journal, and the Post. Start with the Post for sure.
100%, that's sure. Like dessert.
So I read, I am a voracious reader in across the board. So that is more about
always be learning.
Try to be learning that way, and I'm not sure I'm always aiming learning, but that is definitely it. But the point you make about the chains, it's no different than when you're talking about your retirement fund. You say, what the hell does that mean? Compound interest, which is moving the chains. If you get compound interest, by the time some of these young folks here, over 30 years, compound interest is a big mother number. And people sort of forget that because they say, well, I can't save. But when you save, you're moving the chains because 4%, 5%, so whatever the number is.
Even if it's modest.
Over 20 years, it turns out to be gigantic. So there's lots of ways to move the chains. And I think the same thing is true with businesses. You can't do everything in day one. You got to just keep, a lot of it is just slugging every day. You're what's the right word? You're
the grind.
You're pushing the stone uphill.
Yeah.
It's Sisyphus, and the stone comes back sometimes. But you're always pushing, and that's moving the chains. And the chains back to everything's measurable. So it ultimately is whether it's in market share, profitability. They make, one of the firms I was on the board of, they made a huge thing about, how happy everyone was working there, which is a wonderful thing, except they were losing market share. Now, that lasts for a while, but they're not going to be happy when you got to cut back expenses or whatever. So it's a very circular thing when you're trying to, in an organization, get it on a track that goes forward, number one. Number two, very few organizations, in my experience, can keep at it, can keep doing it. If you look at the top 25 companies today, you go back to 1995, 30 years, 20 years, go back 20 years, they're all different. So it is a shark world out there,
in corporate America, it's how your last quarter, your last year, right? Profit, it's all that. Like a coach, like a Super Bowl winning coach. Coach, you're 6-6 this year. Yeah, but I won a Super Bowl. Yeah, you're 6-6 this year.
That's the right. And so it's a Darwinian. That's the word I was thinking for.
Survival of the fittest.
So you got to remember that this is all Darwinian, and it changes fast. Who's up? Yeah. Who would have thought that Microsoft could come back the way it has? This CEO's done a phenomenal job. When you see companies change, but you don't see that very often. More often, they're down here, and there's somebody new, NVIDIA.
And Microsoft showed how nimble they can still be.
Still are.
Yeah,
you're right.
Still be.
So I'm very admiring of those people running companies that big, because I think that is a bear cat. It's hard.
Hello, everyone. Exclusively for Game Recognizes Game listeners, our sponsor, I'm so proud to be in partnership with NOBULL, giving our listeners a 30% discount code for all their products that'll help you achieve all your goals. Please go to NOBULLproject.com/game to receive your 30% discount. That's www.nobullproject.com/GAME.
Let's put 2 minutes on the clock. Having a little fun now. Hardest race you ever rode?
72 Olympic finals.
Greatest lesson you learned, sports or business?
They're both related. Everything we've talked about, Marty, I could say it could be sports, it could be business, but I think it's.
What do you think is that your favorite lesson? Was it a mentor, a coach? Just something that you always go back to?
I don't know. I think it's left foot, right foot. You know, a lot of this is just, I say to young people, I was kidding with someone who I sent an email up here. I got here early because I say, be on time, you know, be on time. What pisses you off in your life more than when you have to wait for somebody, you know, who you've planned?
Sure.
So be on time. Next, you got to keep going. Persistence matters.
And when you arrived, you were announced.
Keep going.
One foot in front of the other.
I think that's, you know, I think a lot of this is you just got to keep at it.
And show up.
Show up. Yeah. Showing up is 90% of life, you know, and people forget this. They just 100%. Don't get it. And showing up with a positive attitude is another 90% of life. Think about in your own life. People who keep you waiting forever. They're done with me because I leave them. I used to leave guys on the street when we were going down to see a client because I said, we're going to be on time. We're not going to be late. All we are is a bunch of suits. You know, we're not going to keep someone waiting. I think the same thing is true when you think about the persistence matters. Just, you've got to stay at it. And that's a hard thing to do. It's a very hard thing to do.
Fritz, if you had the honor and privilege of sitting here with 18-year-old Fritz, what would you tell him?
Go for it, bud. You got to go for it. I don't know. I mean,
did he have doubts at 18?
No, I think I would say I didn't know anything. I came down here, I didn't even know what business I was getting into. I had no idea what I was doing. I had done the Olympics and I thought, that'll take care of myself. Somehow this schmuck found my resume and that's how I ended up down here. So it's a total serendipity, total fluke. And so I didn't have any idea at all. So I got into it, and once you get into the mall, it starts pulling you in and you sort of, you say, hey, this is sort of stimulating in many respects.
Go for it.
I don't think I was, it comes back to that point I made earlier. I've never had a 5-year plan. I sort of said, let's play hard every day we can. Let's do the best we can. And
you're almost coaching him. You're coaching 18-year-old Fritz.
Well, yeah, go for it. Find out what you want to, you know, and start down a path and go for it. Yeah. And the hardest thing I think the hardest thing is setbacks. I've been fired, you know, that sucks. Trust me. And I got all kinds of stories about it, but I've been fired. Yeah. So, but I've also been,
me too.
I've also been lucky to, you know, run 5 or 6 businesses, but I have been, so, you know, this does happen. Yeah. Shit hits the fan, but it's okay as long as you believe in what you're doing in yourself and you really, in your own integrity in that respect. So the easiest thing to do is just go run out there and try to make the first $1 million fast. Everyone says, you know, this is how it is not easy. Everything is hard in general. And there are people who have genius. I'll go back to Jobs. They had genius, well, or Musk. Well, okay, so did Leonardo da Vinci. There are people like that. Most of us aren't those people. Yeah. So we got to come to grips with that.
That's right.
And do the best we can with the hand we've been dealt and get help. Well, people to mentor you, people in your peer group that you can
be coachable, right?
Remember I told you this, why I hate Zoom. If you're doing a complicated problem.
Jamie Dimon hates Zoom too.
He does, for the same reason I do. He and I have talked about it. That if you and I are doing a complicated problem and we're dealing with it, I'm not getting it. You and I, there are 4 of us on the Zoom call. I'm not getting what the hell's going on. It happens all the time in life. Yeah. In a normal course, if you're in the office, I walk into your office, my buddy next door, and I say, Jesus, Marty, I kind of miss that. And I don't feel like a complete asshole because he's a peer, you know? Yeah. Now, I'm on a Zoom call. Marty's on the call, Joe, Schmo, Mo. So I'm not going to say on that call, Marty, I didn't get that. Because you know, I don't want to.
You're in your pajamas, they're in their pajamas, everyone's in their pajamas.
I didn't get that, Marty. Whereas I can go see you in my office and just shoot the breeze. Yeah. So I think, you know, that's the whole learning process of if you have a peer group that's good, good likes game. You know, as long as there's respect, you don't mind telling me anything because I'm not taking anything from you.
100%.
Now, it's not 100% in New York. There are some real scumbags. But in general, my experience has been very, and I feel like if you treat people with respect, you know, that'll work.
And you can get good to great, and leaders are always curious. They stay curious and they keep learning. They embrace the technology called Zoom, right? But then like, yeah, I get it. It has its place, but let's get back to work.
That's
right.
what I
Let's roll our sleeves up.
I think it's shocking to me that the resistance to some of this,
Let's talk about something, and we're going to finish on this, is that I love the story that you got a chance to go to the Olympics with your brother, who meant a lot to you, Billy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and he and you are both in the Harvard Hall of Fame, Athletic Hall of Fame. And we lost Billy about 5 years ago.
Right.
And he meant a lot to you. And most recently you had a chance to dedicate the clubhouse for the heavyweight rowers at Harvard, and that was this past weekend, I believe, or a week ago.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah. And how about we end with, what would you want to tell Billy now?
I miss you, bud. You know, we were born on the same day, 2 years apart. My mother, I've always claimed my mother pushed him out hard, but probably squished his eggs a little, you know, because she was going to be goddamn sure we were both born on the same day. I know my mother. So for the first 2 years, you know, he was born in Puerto Rico. My father was running a mill in Puerto Rico at the time. So I said, I always got to tease him growing up. I said, 1, you're not going to be president. And 2, you were my 2-year-old birthday present. So screw off.
I love it. He'd be laughing. Well, we miss him too.
Yeah.
Fritz, this has been great. Thank you so much. An
Marty,
honor to
thank
have
you.
you, man. Have an Olympian here, our first Olympian on the show. And it's exactly what I knew it was going to be. And I can't thank you enough.
Thanks, Bill.
Good to see you.